Bonjour.
Alain Dinin, hello. Elisabeth Martichoux, hello. Thank you for being with us. So, what could be the new housing policy with a big question mark? I know this is quite a topic you're interested in. Now, could we go back a bit? So, March 16, 67 million French people got confined, locked down. There was kind of a sideration effect, and we could have a snapshot of the housing situation in France. We discovered that most French people lived in houses and gardens, but we also realized that housing is a major factor of inequality. Some people experience confinement in really cramped housing, but on March 16th, the housing building sites stopped. Now, could we sort of take stock of the housing market and building industry? Is it back on track? Yeah. There is another aspect. 8 million people are in poor housing. I live in urban centers, and clearly there is a difference, social and political difference between urban and non-urban zones. Now, real estate market of building, the former, what I would call the heritage real estate, well, it exists. There are people who rent them, buy them, sell them. Well, this market stopped, indeed, during the lockdown period, but it is picking up again because it is traditional. But then there is the new housing market, which is what would make it possible to fluidize the market. We'll have new housing, new dwellings. Well, of course, prices would become stable, but of course, the building sites stopped during the confinement, and all the building sites are starting again. But we're now facing a double issue. We don't have enough new housing offering for reasons we could discuss later on if you wish. But then there is a population which cannot afford to buy housing, cannot get credit, fear losing their jobs. So we face a double issue: not enough offering and not enough demand. There is less production of new housing for the coming years. So possibly in a dense urban zone, an increase of all the housing, but unfortunately, families do not have the means to buy. Now, concerning the prices, a lot of people said the price will collapse, and actually they did not. So should we be reassured with that or not? Well, the problem of housing is that everybody has an opinion. If I were in the nuclear industry and I were building a nuclear power plant, you could talk ecology or not. But about the housing, everybody thinks that because next door something happened, well, it's very worrying. Yeah, it is a major issue. It is a major issue. I grant you that. But as you are asking, will there be, what is the housing policy for tomorrow? So is there a housing policy in France? Was there a housing policy in France in the last 40 years? The answer is no. Now, real estate per itself, the need for housing is huge. Population, demography, French population is growing. So we have to get a couple of figures in mind. There will be 4 million families more in 10 years. In the 4 million families, half of them will be single parent or single person. So we have to build 400,000 new housing every year, which is a figure we haven't achieved or reached since about 5-6 years. We are below that figure, and because of the COVID crisis, plus the lack of policies, plus the issues of municipal elections in France, in 2021 and 22, we'll build less than 200,000 new housings or apartments. And so population will switch to older housing with the price will increase, but people don't have the money. Now, if you allow me, says Madame, where we hear about the housing policy through slogans, great declarations and figures, we need 400, 300, 400,000 or 500,000, new housing. But doesn't mean much, actually. If I live in Romorantin near Paris or in somewhere in the if I live in a region in France, if I'm a mayor of that city, I don't need to have the same number of flats or housing than if I'm in a large city. So demography doesn't mean much as an absolute figure. We have to define the specific zones. Well, the answers from the politics is not in terms of housing policy. They were, as you say, it's slogans about topics. We need more social housing, or we'll do energy renovation, or we have to stop towers, or we have to stop, having to stop putting concrete everywhere, whereas the real topic is that to deal with the populations, and populations actually are where they live. So a regional housing policy, but with a national policy. Do I want France of owners, which was something President Sarkozy wanted, or do I want social housing policy, which was President Hollande tried to do with the Cité Duflot? And every topic is complex, like controlling the renting price, or excess of social housing, or maybe there is no need for it in some places. So anyway, the approach is to have a political vision. What is the current government on the next government vision? Do we want France where everybody will be an owner of the dwelling, or will we rent? Do we have to think about the local populations? So once we've defined the general topic, which is basically, as far as I'm concerned, would be a France of everybody has a flat in good conditions, good housing in good conditions, then we'll have to run it, regionally in Ile-de-France or in Provence. So it's not the same problem. So you have to have a regional policies, provide financial means, and then ask ourselves the question to know who will convey this, while people will decide not to be owners or will not be able to be owners. So we need a national policy, political national vision, and a local policy. But it's very complex in politics. Who should give the building permit? Who should deliver the building permit? Well, in a city, medium-sized city, well-defined, the mayor is legitimate. But in a large urban area, take around Paris, for example, why would we have such or such city with its own specificity, which problem of traffic, mass transit, schools, and so on and so forth. So the level has to be adapted to the zones, and because of that, we have to define new fiscal policies. And for example, in the département, which is a French administrative definition. Now, political vision is this. Now, do I define housing at the level of the region with local definitions, with a global scope of reflection? As long as we haven't made a decision, we are just stacking up. We're dealing with... You were saying there is no policy. Of course, it's difficult to define the definition of a national policy of housing yet. Today, where we're questioning the way we could reorient the economic policy, well, we have to re-industrialize France. Okay, we de-industrialized, we've gone into services. No, but how do you reorient the housing policy? What is that policy, first and foremost? Okay, what do we want to do? Am I dealing with population? What is the dwelling for a young couple, for a single person, for a student, for a pensioner or worker who has to be close to his working location? So the traffic, circulation, schools. What is the absolute priority? The absolute priority is to find housings for people, the human dimension. We talk about individuals. We don't talk about we can only talk about politics are people. Well, again, it's not the same thing in a small town or in Paris. But again, once I've decided that what I want to talk about, if I want to talk about people, and my objective is that, I cannot imagine that we have only 300,000 housing per year. In 10 years, there will be 10 million people with poor housing in France. Is this possible? Can we accept that? This is not acceptable because we have no policies, because we'll try to solve little solutions here and there. No, we deal with this issue of housing with technical answers. Now, if I have a word, if I have a thinking and a vision, and then I want this to adapt this vision by territory, by zones, by cities, for example. Social housing. Take the example, social housing, purely in terms of semantics. What is social? It's not the people, the housing, it's the people who live in there. Well, Often, well, unfortunately, this misused word, social housing, in terms of, no, I cannot. And I would go even further because this is a political type discussion, the housing policy. So I have technical response, I can lower the prices, whatever. But anyway, we have to make sure that people will have a societal vision. So, we don't want to do a segmentation of population. So today, shouldn't we have in my building, in my bourgeois building, should have social housing, the social mixity. And of course, at the political level, it is impossible to withstand. But the president or the minister in charge who would say that, would be, killed. But anyway, now, yeah, okay, it's like not, but there's the not in my backyard, syndrome. Now, for example, we had the municipal election. If you're the mayor from so-called left, we could make people accept the principle of social mixity, but you cannot build more, possibly. But we have to re-densify. So now it is so touchy electoralist. At the election level, you see politicians take it through broad slogans which are empty, meaningless, and which cannot be implemented. And despite that, I didn't hear one mayor being elected on we are going to build more social housing. So, no. There is a lot of hypocrisy. We are dealing with the electoralist vision. So to transform a country or city, it takes at least 10 years, You got elections every 5-6 years, and we're talking about, there will be COVID in November, why the economy will collapse, there will be unemployed people. So, and among all those crises, we want to know if the president will run again. So, well, some people went through very harsh confinement situation. 80%, a certain number of the population cannot find housing, the heritage rights, and, every city, every department, every zone, every region has its own policy. Whereas all it intertwined. I cannot build housing if I don't build schools, transport, healthcare. I cannot industrialize a city and said that we'll have people there if around this I don't have the shops, for example. So, of course, we have to look at the local dimension, but the vision has to be global. The application has to be local, but the vision has to be global. And it's not done by trades. It's not segmented. It concerns the entire population. And basically, we have to find decent housing or dwelling for people. It's difficult to lower prices, so we need to do it. So institutions have to start thinking about it. Money has to get back into this domain, and we should stop having those very friendly salon, discussions, So, 200,000 jobs, will be impacted. Now, prices, are still on the rise, Now, in this aspect, do you think that we should block the rental, the rent prices? No. But of course, should we cap the rentals? Well, we investors of a housing, we're going to rent, okay? And we say, well, you have to cap the rent and lower it even though. But come on. Let's not be insulted as a filthy capitalist, and let's think that the landowner, actually, is just contributing to the well-being of the population. So if you do it at the foot of a building, if you create a little shop, or you create a little shop or something, your shop owner, if you rent at acceptable prices, I'm in favor of that, lowering the price of land, lowering the margin of the real estate investors. And so how do we do this? Well, the state has to do something there. We all heard about, I know it is national education doesn't bring anything. Police doesn't bring anything. So governments considered that, housing could bring in money. So, of course, housing cost 40 billion. In 40 billion, put half of this on the, personal housing support with all the topics we know, especially for the students. Now, but 40 billion cost, it costs a lot of money. Do you know how much it yield? 77 billion. So an increase of 10 billion over 5 years. It is a shame. It is a shame. This because, as President Macron said, I don't want to increase taxes because tax is higher than the average of other countries. Well, the housing in France is the most highly taxed domain in France. Difference between France and Germany is half. So this has to be solved. VAT at 20% for someone who buys a house for the first time. Does it make sense? You said the first thing would be to go for humans, from the humans, based on the territory. We got that. So we're talking about demography. What does it mean? This could be another slogan, Well, to build housing for the very poor and for social housing, and to rethink the social housing policy as a whole. Well, see if investors, such like life insurances, banks, maybe could be involved in this. We like incentives. I don't know. Maybe. They won't go if they don't get incentives. But possibly today, with some tax incentives, there could be a social counterpart. Now, for first-time owners, well, if you buy, for example, your housing when as you finish paying it in 20 years, and if you're still in a couple and you don't need it, you buy the other part of the housing. We could do access housing. We can lower the prices, but we could say in some housing there could be social mixity between younger and older people whose prices could be differentiated. So when I transform housing in offices in housing, I don't apply because we go into technical issues, but this is when we talk on granulometry, but less national standards, more flexibility, different treatments, but put the players around the table. Mr. Raffarin, at one stage, the Prime Minister did it. It led to a certain number of things. Jean-Louis Borloo, when they had this ministry, which include ecology, sustainable development, or urban planning, housing, and he asked this chain how it could produce houses. Well, real estate prices are going up, so everything is good. So you gave a program for the future Minister of Housing. So, or the State Secretary, we shall see. If it's a State of Secretary, it will be a disaster. It is a major issue. It is a major issue, housing. This is a key point. You cannot build a life if you don't have a house. You need a flat, and you have to be in decent conditions. It is the first budget of households, 45% for 10% poorest, 45% of their purchasing power. So by the time you get all the topics, all the thematics, problematics, yet went by, 14 months left, we should need an expert there. Well, okay, but someone who has the political will and courage to oppose the situation. So what lobby, it's an issue of lobby. It's a state, it has to be a state minister with a mission, but resistance will be numerous. We know that. I can't give you the list, but first and foremost, there will be a state administrative organization, and the way building permits are delivered, and the way land is 30% of a housing price. It's a market that has to be regulated. It's difficult for boss of Nexity, who is a capitalist, to say that this is regulated. It is a market that has to be regulated, but not by the little side, not, okay. So there is a need for regulation. Let me give you another example. Energy renovation. Okay, great, let's do this. This is the very trendy thing, the fashionable thing. It's like the motto. But, so no means no terrace. A terrace is a thermal spot. No co-ownership, because the co-owners will have to do housing. So any energy works you do will see no profit on your operating cost. There is a climate cost for energy renovation, but you have to see if the co-ownership have to do that. So I think we are not going to reform the law in France. I regret it, because we won't be able to do energy renovation, even if we imagine a new model. could I do the energy renovation as like a petrol for a highway? You know, the building will be renovated, and then there will be, you know, all the owners will pay a bit for it. But you know, at Nexity, we also sending, you know, we got 22,000 buildings in co-ownership, and trust me, the decision of a General Assembly and the financing is 3 to 5 years. So, you know, emergency, urgency. So we have to be aware of the fact that the world has changed, and in a world that has changed, we have to dare new ways of acting. The world which has changed is like ecology at every stage. Now, to densify urban housing habitat is essential. Could it be ecological? Well, the image of ecology is like the, you know, green field, the countryside, the birds and bees. No, as you said, you know, as beginning, 60% of French people own individual housing. It's called urban sprawl. So it's counterintuitive, but ecology means that you have to build the city over the city, to densify, to have parks, squares, gardens, but have to clear the space. So I have to go higher. So again, we're back to another problem. Have you heard many mayors saying, I'm going to build towers? Or usually they do 4 floors, and well, together with Roland Castro, which is a great urban planner, we did a tower in the Paris region, 11 floors, and everybody thinks it's great because at every floor there are gardens, space, and so on and so forth. It's a concept. We have to work about what's beautiful. We can do towers, beautiful ones, but we cannot do ecology by doing urban sprawl because I go too far. Then there will be transport, 2 cars. Yeah, there is no school, no shops, and so on and so forth. And it is counterintuitive, absolutely. So people, you know, it is counterintuitive, and it's good for you to remind us. Now, to conclude, now, if you allow me, we talked about the 8 million people who were poorly housed in France, but still, if we look back now, 50 years ago, people, you know, most of the French population were in poorer housing. But the population was lower, The population was lower. You know, we had a lower population 50 years ago. Well, I was 35 million less equipped and so on and so forth, but we had less issues in public transport. There was no globalization. Now the population is higher and the French demography is growing. So we are at a low level of housing production. And for 5-6 years, you know, politicians say, yes, it's an interesting topic and so on and so forth. But I think indeed we may find a lot of interest. It's our life. But then after that, political will to oppose that, well, that's we need to have that. And I don't know if I would dare do it, but this is what we should do. To conclude, you came back in difficult circumstances, painful circumstances. Now, are you optimistic? This break, well, it wasn't a break. I decided to change my life. I took it a break. Unfortunately, I had to come back. In the world crisis, you know, there is a risk and opportunity, and you got no choice to move forward. I'm very sad about the death of my friend Jean-Philippe Ruggieri, the director who died at 50 of COVID. But anyway, well, you know, Nexity, 11,000 employees. We're useful in the country, and it gives me a lot of energy to move on. So let's move on. Thank you very much. Very useful. Thank you, Alain Dinin. Have a good day.